going to try this again. We had to ride into town because the internet at the house is out again. So the devil, he's just trying to not allow us to do what we're trying to do for the Lord. So here it goes again. I've got my gardening hat on. And yeah, we talked about the devil being the father of lies and how we showed this empty pizza box. There was nothing inside. And the devil promises things, and he's father of lies, and he's just, all the things that he offers, they're really just an empty box of promises. He's a liar. But I got thinking about that box, and it made me realize that, see, yesterday God used this empty pizza box for his purpose. As we told the story, it was just an old empty pizza box. But God can use anything and anyone. You know, if someone makes themselves available to God, you can use me. Sometimes God uses things that are not even alive. He used this pizza box for his purpose. And I brought this block of wood. It's a piece of firewood. And more than once in my block of wood, his purpose. So all you got to do is make yourself available. This block of wood, how has God used a block of wood for his purpose? Well, one time I saw an advertisement on Facebook, on Marketplace. Somebody up in Mount Storm was advertising they had some wood, big pieces of wood that they wanted to get rid of. And so I rode up there, got an address and rode up there. And when I got there, it was someone that I knew, Justina and Jonah. They lived there at this place, and they had great big blocks of wood. I mean, some of them, they were bigger than I could pick up. I was really grunting, and I loaded these blocks of wood. Well, their grandchildren, a young boy and a young girl, came out, and they helped me. They rolled blocks and picked up little blocks of wood, and I got talking to them, and their names, the girl's name was Sierra, and the boy's name was Bladen. And it was probably about springtime when we were loading all this wood, this firewood. And I got talking to them and invited them to go with us to camp when we had camp in July every year for our youngsters at the church. And so Sierra and Bladen ended up going to camp with us. And they had a fun time for the 3 days where we were at camp. And God worked it out so that firewood put us together and made that happen. Another time I was on Facebook in Marketplace, and I saw some lady had a big rack of trees that stretched out, and all the wood was small pieces of wood or wood that was already split up. So I looked at it and I thought, wow, that's what I need. So I don't have to split some of that. I need some firewood. And so I rode out there to her house and met her. Her name was Elizabeth. And we struck a deal, and I started throwing wood on the back of my truck, and she was helping me. It was a pile of wood and a big rack of wood. And so her daughter, Annabelle, and her son, Ashton, walked down from the house, down the little driveway, and got down there, and they started helping. And I had a good time just talking with those that young boy and that young girl, and they were very, very helpful. Mom was, and the two youngsters were very, very helpful. But we were throwing firewood on the back of my truck. And I drove away that day. I know that we talked about the Lord a little bit. And so it must have been a few months went by, and I get a message through Facebook, this Elizabeth that I had bought this firewood from. She's got questions. God has worked it out that now Elizabeth is coming. Ashton and Annabelle, her son, her daughter have been coming. Her mother-in-law, Andy, has been coming. And we've even had her husband come. So that whole family, they come and they sit on the second row in our church. Every Sunday morning we have church. You can count on them. They're going to be there. And so they've become part of our church, and they're actively involved in what we're doing. And God used firewood. God used firewood to make that happen. I think about things in the Bible. God used birds one time to feed one of his men. Elijah was in a cave, and God used ravens, and every day the ravens came and brought him food. Like a raven, like a big blackbird. And how about this? One time Jesus actually spit on the ground and maybe took a stick or something, and he stirred the spit into some dirt there and made a little mud pie. And he took that mud pie and he smeared it over some blind man's eyes. He actually used spit and dirt and made mud and put it on that man's eyes and told him to go and wash. And that man's eyes were restored. He was given his sight. So just what we've talked about today, God has used firewood. He's used an old pizza box. He used spit and dirt. He used a flock of birds, a flock of ravens. God can use anything, and he'd like to use you. And so you might be really young, but you may say, well, God, how could God use a kid? Well, do you remember the story where there were thousands of people and they were listening to Jesus teach one day? He was sharing God with the crowd. And his disciples came and said, it's time for these people to eat. And as they discussed things, one of the disciples said, well, there is a boy here, there's one boy that's got a lunch. He's got 5 loaves and 2 fish. And Jesus took that lunch. That boy must have offered it to Jesus. Said, here, you can use that. And Jesus took that and prayed over it and broke those fish and those loaves, and he gave it to his 12 disciples, and they distributed it. They had the people sit down in groups of 50, and he fed everybody. And when it was all over, they fed over 5,000 people. And the disciples, each one of them, there were 12 baskets of leftovers gathered up. Each of those disciples, each of those 12 men had a basket. And they looked at that basket full of fish and bread, and they knew, man, we started with 2 little fish and 5 loaves. And they got that from a little boy. There was just a lad there, the Bible says. And so the devil will tell you, oh, God can't use you. But there's many stories in the Bible where God uses boys and girls. God would like to use you. The first step is for you to tell God, God, I'd like you to use me. Please use me. You become a willing servant, a willing vessel, and God takes you. If God can use a stick of firewood or an old pizza box, he can use you. Have a good day.